What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Table Talk. I'm Walker, this is Ashlyn, we are the host, and today we have another close couple friend of ours in, and it is the Woodalls. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves first before I actually intro what this episode is going to be centered around. So please introduce yourselves.
Yeah, so I'm Garret Woodall. This is Carissa Woodall, my wife. Baby Riley's at home. We've been married for 4 years. We met in 2017. Started dating in 2018. I'm in construction. She's a teacher. Has been for a couple of years now. Yeah, basically it's kind of.
All right. How long? Okay, we asked this to the Moores as well. Tony and Amy, because we are all involved, and this is the birth child of Marriage Matters. How did they get y'all wrapped up in this with them?
So that's actually a funny conversation that I had with Tony. Obviously, we all started the life group with them. And we were kind of their guinea pigs because they had led youth, I believe. And so we were their first young adults. And that was kind of cool. They're trying to foster to married people. And we had a...
Well, let me say this. We were in life group with them, in a different life group with them.
Yes.
And so we were there, and Amy...
We didn't really bond there.
Yes, we did.
Well, not as intimately as we are now.
Right.
And
Yes.
No, but Amy has said to me, when we were there, part of what she was seeing, she was like, we've been talking about starting a young married couples group, and now we're seeing it in real life, they need somewhere to go, because we were there with them every week. And I think it was great fellowship, but we did have a whole separate set of our own, issues or, the way that our life was.
Sure.
I mean, very different than everybody else's.
well,
So.
we were close to every other couple's kids' age.
Yes.
Okay.
So it was
Yeah,
very much
yeah.
like they're our parents.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or very big age difference.
So can build good relationships, but maybe not the type you would hang out with, on
Right.
the weekends,
Right.
kind of stuff.
We're not getting
Yes.
coffee, chatting about life problems.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
pretty much endowing wisdom.
Right.
Anyway, so the conversation of, I talked to Tony one time about wanting to do something more with the life group because I recognized that the numbers were dwindling a little bit and maybe attendance would falter because life gets busy, which is all fine and good. But I approached him one day and I was like, hey, what do you think about this feeling that I'm having? And he was like, that's hilarious. I have this thing. And so that was a conversation. That was very much a God, Holy Spirit putting a thought into my head, kind of trusting Tony to kind of voice that.
And I didn't know about this conversation, and so we were taking a meal train to somebody, and Amy and I were riding together. And when I had the baby and then went back to work, I just felt very purposeless. And so I told, and I had been telling him for years since the story that we're going to tell unfolded. I was like, there's something we need to do with that. It didn't happen for no reason. I feel very strongly that God wants that to go somewhere, and I just don't know where. So we got into that conversation on the way to that place, and I was like, Amy, I just don't know. I had to go back to work, and I thought that I was going to get to stay home with my baby, and I didn't, and so that's not God's plan, clearly. But I was like, there's got to be something. And I was like, we have this story, and I don't know what to do with it. And she was like, I know what to do with it. So that's kind of
So I
how
guess we
that
both
started.
kind of had that moment with
But-
the
But separately,
individual,
which
Yeah.
is really cool, because
Yeah.
that shows you, God's really in that.
somebody's playing chess up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to just kind of lead us into what kind of the theme for this episode is. And I let y'all know I sent y'all a message, but I had something typed out that was a lot more. And I was like, no, I'm not going to say everything. But when I was talking to Ashlyn, I was like, I am so glad this early on in this podcast and in Marriage Matters, a story like yours as a couple is going to be told as soon as it is. Because it is an awesome story of redemption that took, some really heavy years to now be in a place that from even everyone around you can see is just so healthy and obviously not perfect, but happy and healthy in a lot of senses that you would hope that a family would be. So I'm so glad that I want people to be able to see this or feel something in themselves or as a couple and be like, I need to know, one, I'm not alone, or two, this is going on right now. What can I do? And they're like action items, because we've got the whole timeline that they sent, which is fantastic, because you can see like where a turning point is, and then where the church is involved, and
The hard work that y'all had to do.
right, like everything is not just throw up a prayer and it's answered. It's like throw up a million prayers, and now we got to get to work to get this done. So I'm so glad we get to kind of just go through this with y'all to find out what it took to get to where you are now. So I'm going to lead us in, and I want to start by just asking if you can give us a taste of how your relationship changed from the early seasons of dating into your engagement. So on the timeline, that's going to be around 2018 to 2019, ending up with when you got engaged.
Yeah. So I'll start that one off because I had a very different background than him. Not necessarily in the way that we grew up. Like, we both grew up in church and our parents loved the Lord. And it wasn't that. But he was not rebellious as a teenager at all, and I was. And so I got myself into some pretty not great situations. And when we met, it was coming off the heels of a relationship that was just not a good situation. I mean, I was not living there, but living there with him, and there was, it was not good. And so up until that point that I met him, like, my view of relationships was shaped by the not good relationships that I'd been in. So, I mean, and it wasn't like they were all just with awful stuff happening, but it was not people that loved the Lord, and it was not people that had the same goals and aspirations as he had. And so I was hooked into the party scene, and I was hooked into just a whole lot of junk. And so coming into this relationship was so different for me. It was so refreshing, because there's a sense of like, oh, he wants us to be in church, and oh, he talks about loving God, and oh, we met at the BCM, so we met at the college, church setting. So
where
like,
all perfect relationships start.
It was just such a breath of fresh air when we met, because it was so very, very, very different for me. But that came with some difficulties, because in my mind, relationships were supposed to play out like X, Y, Z. Like, you meet, you like each other, you have intimacy, you move in together, whatever the case may be. And
it's
so
what you knew.
That's what I knew, and and that's not how I grew up, but that is what I did. So I had expectations that weren't the right expectations.
She experienced pseudo marriage.
Yes.
Right.
That's what it was. It was
Yes.
marriage without the marriage. It
Yes.
was everything that comes with it, but it wasn't like actual, like, committed with her.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
I experienced endless fawning after the girl
Yeah.
being shut down. I never really had a real relationship. And so, we came at it from both ends. And
Very opposite ends of the
very,
spectrum.
very opposites. And not even like that caused issues, but we were so blind to what the other person's goal was that it caused issues along the way, which is interesting to look back on.
So you get engaged, and what was your first step after getting engaged?
Not changing a dang thing.
Well, no.
Continuing to live in sin. And
Yeah. So we weren't officially moved in together until then. We had been staying together, but we were not moved in
So
together
you moved in together, like,
as we got engaged.
So
Gotcha.
around late 2018, maybe early 19,
Okay.
we at that point had half of our closet at each other's
Yes.
apartments.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes. Yes.
So it was
yes.
very much 50-50 where
Yeah,
we
we
lived.
were staying together a lot,
Yeah.
but we
we
didn't.
stayed in the same bed every night.
Almost.
Almost every
Almost.
night.
Yeah.
But it
Alternated.
was a different
Yep,
bed.
yep. And we got engaged. We actually didn't intend to move together for the case of like moving in together, because we were just staying together wherever anyway. But he had our dog, and he wasn't supposed to have our dog, and so they got kicked out, and so it was like, well, I mean, you want to just move in, so that we can have more money for rent? I was like, yeah, great, sounds
Right.
good to me. You know, so
Sounded practical.
it did.
Yeah.
It sounded practical, and in my head, like I said,
Sure.
we did justify it. And like I said, for me, I was like, well, that's the next step. That's what people do. I know that that's not what people in the church do, but that's what normal people do, you know. And so, it's
And
just,
for me, it was cool.
Yeah,
I
sure.
guess that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
yeah.
So, how did you think moving in when you got engaged was going to affect the relationship, and how did it actually affect the relationship?
I guess she probably thought about it more, maybe because she's a girl and girls think about that.
Amen, amen, brother.
Do not think about that. But I thought, and it was kind of a trope in our early relationship, but she had such a goal-oriented, very bluntly, even though we're not married, if we're not having sex, you don't love me.
Right.
And if we're not sharing a bank account, even though we're not married yet, you don't love me. And if we're not doing all of these things that I've experienced in past relationships, you don't
You
love
don't
me.
love me.
And after me not pretty much experiencing a pseudo marriage relationship, I was like, okay, yeah, you're right. I want to show you
Sure.
that I love you. And so
Sure.
moving in was another one of those kind of void stepping stones of this is going to be the thing that shows her that I love her. And it wasn't.
Right.
Well, and to me, like I keep saying this, but that was just like the next step to me. So I didn't think that anything was going to change, except for that's just what we would do. And I mean, he was different from the people I'd been with before, so I hoped that eventually it would end in marriage. But like, I was content to be what we were. You know, I was like, well, this is a good thing. Like, we're engaged now. We will get married. We will set a date, whatever. But like, this is what we're doing, and so this is like, we are a family. Like, this is, and it was very much playing house. But to me, I thought, okay, this is
Again,
what we would do.
Again, the marriage without the marriage.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because
So-
marriage implies something completely different.
Right.
Yep.
than
So-
that fleshly love.
So at that point, when was the talk of a wedding day even really talked about? In let's call it like the early months of engagement. Was that even at the forefront of your mind?
It wasn't at the forefront of my mind. I didn't actually want a wedding, and that's a whole different. But
Sure.
yes, because the other layer to this that I guess we haven't said is we just moved in together and we didn't tell anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So
The only person that knew was my friend that lived with us
yes, like
prior to the engagement.
nobody had any idea. Like, his family would have been not upset by it like mine would, but they didn't know. Like, my mom didn't know. Like, nobody knew. I was just living over there, and nobody had any idea. So
That's pretty-
there was a pressure to do the marriage thing so that
Yeah.
it was not a secret we had to keep any longer.
That's pretty interesting though, because previous relationships you said you would find yourself staying over at their houses,
They didn't know that either.
and they didn't know that
No,
either.
no.
But
Yeah.
your family, the thought at the time, because it didn't happen because they didn't know, the thought that your family wouldn't be as upset as Carissa's, why do you think that would be? When you came from I'm the church guy.
They
I-
did it though.
Because if we would have moved in, her family would have straight
Yes.
So
figured
my-
something out with
I would have
me.
been disowned. It's
Well,
okay.
I
his
think
family
we
did
knew-
it.
I think we knew that my parents weren't. I think we knew that the harshest reaction my parents were going to give were
Yeah.
because they did the same thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And so we're in a situation where, like, when our child gets older, if that's a conversation, like, it's not like I can pretend like we didn't do that, you know?
Sure.
And so we have the discussion of,
True.
like, hey, listen, like, I love you, and this is why we probably shouldn't do this, and we experienced that, and so I'm here to tell you that that's not all that it's cracked up to be, but, like, I can't have an overly emotional reaction of, like, you should never do this, and, like,
How
whatever.
dare
I mean,
you.
we did it, you know, and I
Well,
think
like,
it's the same thing.
I
Like,
think-
they did it.
I think we've all experienced an adult being like, "You shouldn't drink when you're a child because it's bad," and it's like, "Well, you did," and it's like, "Well, yeah, but it was different."
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're gonna be like, "This is your life, and you're gonna do what you want." But because I love you, I'm gonna tell you that
Yeah.
it's damaging and it
Yeah.
hurts and it sucks, and you shouldn't because here's all the pain.
Mhm. Yeah.
But it's your life. Go ahead.
Right.
Right.
If you're 18, I can't really stop you.
Yes.
Right.
And I don't think that we would have experienced that from either of our parents.
Mm. So let's go into everybody's favorite topic, which is COVID.
Yes. Ooh,
And
okay.
even
Oh, man.
from y'all's timeline, that is what I don't even know. Like for us, COVID was. It really didn't change the daily go to work or
Right.
the like our daily weekly routine motions, but things were moving hard and fast in 2020 for the two of you. Like, I mean, both of you lost your jobs,
Yes.
but weren't able to get unemployment.
Yes.
And in that time, in the midst of these things already, both families didn't know
Yep.
that y'all were living together.
Yep.
How did all of these things weigh on you as a couple when they were just stacked on stacked on stacked?
So, some context was we were both the children of our parents that weren't going to move back in no matter what.
Mm.
But both of us were in that position.
You had made that.
We had both said.
Well,
in
we
and
had
of
also
ourselves,
just
like,
we'd lived on our own for so long that like you know, like it just I don't know. There was not a situation where I was like, oh yes, at the age of 20, whatever, I'm
Sure.
gonna move back in. Like, yeah,
COVID hitting and us losing our jobs wasn't like, which is a fine response, but it wasn't like, dang, we got to move in with our parents.
yes,
That
Sure.
wasn't a thought in our
You
mind.
just had to figure something
We had-
else
yeah.
out.
And
Had to go to
so
work.
There was
Yep.
that, but before that, March 17th, I remember the day, I got a call of, hey, we're not opening back up. I was waiting tables.
yes.
And I think it was the next day, she had a conversation with her boss of, because of COVID, we're not going to do this anymore.
Yes, and so context here also, like everybody else, or most other people were able to lose their job and then they had unemployment plus some because it was that
Yeah.
extra whatever. So like we
Yes.
were watching all of our friends be like, oh yeah, we get to stay home because of COVID, $700 a week, and that was just not our situation. I was not let go by my company. I was asked not to return by a client's mom because I was helping out with a client who lived with her mom. And so the company didn't let me go.
She
So
was
I
told she
wasn't
has
unemployed. I was an
0
employee with
hours.
0 hours. And
That's not firing. That's a
and
crazy
so
thing.
and he
I had my
had his real estate license. He was not yet practicing. He had gotten it in February, and COVID happened in March. So he
Oh
was
my
not yet
gosh.
he
Awesome
was not
timing.
yet procuring any business, but that's a license that he can use to make money. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So all that's to say, COVID, like March 17th, 18th was like, no job, and here's no money.
Yeah.
And we still have leases on separate apartments.
Wow.
Did we not?
No, we
Well,
were
either
we were
way.
good on that.
Either
But
way.
still, you still had rent.
We did have rent.
Yeah, we still had rent, and I think she had started before I did, but we started cleaning banks.
Yeah.
So like, there's quarantine isolation, and then there's working together 24/7 isolation, and then there's
Yes.
we're married now.
Nope, not married.
Well, you know,
Trick question.
living a married life.
The,
but
Right.
in
the
bed.
pseudo married,
Yes,
which
yes,
I really
yes,
like
yes.
that
And
phrase.
so
I do too.
it was together all the time, together all the time, together all the time, together all the time.
And something I
It was a
said,
lot.
it's like before we could get away from our sin. Like we could not think about it for a while. Like I could go hang out with a friend, and several times I would. Like I would go have a girls' night, and I would spend the night with my friend. Like we were in college. Like that's whatever. And so it wasn't like. But then at this point, it was like you are living in sin, and you're never gonna get away from it because you're with each other when you wake up. You're with each
Right.
other when you go to work. I had school, but my school was at my house virtually, so
Right.
I'm gonna sit here on my school while you sit there and do whatever you're gonna do, and then we're gonna go to work together, and we're gonna come home, and we're gonna do that again and again and again. And so there's no getting out of the fact, like there's no moment to pause and be able to take a breath and realize, like, get away from the sin. It was there all the time.
Yeah, and so at that time, like, what were some of the feelings that y'all were feeling in those moments?
I think the creeping feeling that started off as she leaves cabinet doors open turned into I really don't like her anymore.
Yeah.
Slowly but
Yeah.
surely it became I'm tired of her.
Yeah.
Because all of these little things is not what I see her as.
Well, and for me, I think the right answer would be that we moved in together, and I immediately felt guilt over those things, but I did not.
Yeah.
When that was what I knew. I had done this before with other people. Like
Yeah.
I knew that life, and so it didn't feel wrong to me until I was living with it 24 hours a day. And so
Right.
I mean, what I know now is the Holy Spirit. I didn't have a name for it then, but I was like slowly like, this is not right, and something's up here, and I feel deeply in my soul unsettled, like something's up here. And I just remember that just progressively got worse. Like it started when COVID started, and like by the time May hit, I was like, I cannot take this feeling anymore. Like
Yeah.
something is wrong, and this is not what we need to be doing. Like,
So, were you able to feel the thoughts that started stacking up with him towards the end of I do not like her
Resent- yeah.
anymore? You could start
Yeah,
feeling that.
I know we had several conversations, which at that point we were bickering, I would say. Like we were having fights, but it wasn't these big blow up
Sure.
fights. It was just very much like discontent in our home.
Picks.
Yes. And so I remember like there were several conversations where I'm like, I just don't feel loved by you anymore. Like
Yeah.
that was the trope. I'm like, I don't feel like loved by you, and like we can't go on real dates, it's COVID, but like we could make some intentional time together.
Yes.
And he's like, we're spending time together all the time, and I'm like, but it's not intentional time. And
So just not understanding one another
Yes.
and where you were at that point.
Well, and something that I don't want to start talking about later and it seem like it's out of nowhere, but something that had been a big problem for me just very much in secret was porn. And like, we were talking about it the other day, and like the epitome of sex with her was physically gratifying, because how could it not be? But then I didn't have that emotional connection there,
Yeah.
which I think is what most men run to porn for, is having sex with your wife is pretty easy. And getting emotional gratification as a man is not. And so porn was the perfect remedy to that emotional gratification.
Right.
I didn't have to apologize to the person I was looking at. I didn't have to make them happy to be able to have that connection with them. And that was just a fix for me. And that also aided in the I don't like her anymore. Because having sex with her, as gross as it sounds now, having sex with her required me to be a good husband.
Because
Right.
then you
'Cause
would
you-
get that privilege.
Right. You're not mad at each other and making love or being
Right.
intimate or like being cute.
Not most of the time.
It's just very unnatural to like really just
Sure.
dislike the person
Sure,
and be
of
like,
course.
hey, you look great today.
Yeah.
You don't do
Yes.
that.
Well,
It usually requires some sort
and I
of
feel
fix.
that was something too. Like again, we're with each other 24/7, so something that was something that could be hidden behind closed doors at one point. It's like I'm with you all the hours of the day.
Yeah.
What you gonna do? You know.
Yeah.
And so
True. So, I mean, now I don't know when the timeline was for this, but right underneath this, it says that y'all had wise counsel that y'all met with that pushed the decision. So obviously, what you didn't know as conviction and what just wasn't on the forefront of your minds at the time, someone either sought you out or you sought someone out who said, what y'all are doing right now and living together isn't right. And I know y'all have got this wedding that y'all are planning. Why don't you just move it up and get it done? So unless it is a secret, who or what was the wise counsel that y'all sought out and found?
So,
I would preface that like I had been saying this to him for months. Like when COVID started, I was like, I don't feel right about this. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. Something's
it
wrong.
was the perfect concoction of me not liking her and her saying, hey, I got this problem.
Well,
I
and
don't care.
we also talked about this. It is a problem I started. And when we talk about when we moved in together, truly, like, you know, in most scenarios, you hear that it was the male pushing for that. And that was not the case in our relationship. He's somebody who has only ever been with his wife. I mean, we weren't married at the time, but this is a one and done situation. That wasn't the case for me. So
Sure.
I was the one that pushed for this to happen, and then I had made this thing happen, and I was like, now I have a problem with the thing that I caused. help me fix it, you know?
But you had made, Garrett, you became comfortable
Yes.
with her lifestyle, maybe.
I just ignored the problems that came with it because I wanted to make her happy. Because
Gotcha.
respectfully, her problems were bigger than the problems that came from other things. Because I didn't see those problems yet.
Right.
I didn't know those problems yet. Like, bluntly, going to porn causes problems. It does. And you can't avoid that.
Yeah.
Even
And we
if,
don't
even
need
if
to
you're
ignore
active
that.
outside of that, it still causes problems.
Right.
And so
And I didn't want to face those.
I said that for months, and I finally, like, when I said in May, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, we have got to do something. I'm, like, about to have an emotional, mental breakdown. Like, this is something deep in my soul is wrong, and I feel it every day.
Yes.
Finally, then he was like, okay, we can do something about this, and you can talk
So-
about that.
A little biblical wisdom. Matthew 7:7, ask and you shall find, ask and it shall be given to you. There's no prerequisite for having to ask. It's not, you have to be saved and tithing and having gone to church for 2 years and like it's just, hey, ask the question. That's all it takes. And so I believe that the first mentor tugging on our hearts was the Holy Spirit. I
Wow.
firmly believe that there were so many things that lined up to be, we're not smart enough to think of those solutions on our own.
Right.
And so I think that the Holy Spirit has a very good way of pulling our ears and us being like, huh?
Yes.
And then the solution to our problem is where we felt that tug. And so the person that was that wise counsel is Jamie Ferris. He's my biblical father, and he was my youth pastor. He baptized. He led me to actual salvation. He taught me a lot about just a lot. And so we talked to him. Still reach out to him every once in a while when something's tough. I
Very
reach out to
cool.
him. He married us.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, he performed our ceremony.
Which we will get to that.
John Teeter married us, but Jamie Ferris did the ceremony.
But we didn't come to him about that problem. We came to him because I was feeling so off. And I think that I was just like, hey, listen, I don't know what to do with this. And that conversation wasn't even a conversation of, well, are you living with him? You need to move out. It was a
Right.
conversation of, oh, I think you need to know the Lord. And I was like, I've been going to church my entire life. I've been baptized. So, and I didn't know the Lord. I knew that I knew of the Lord. I knew that I had spent all this time in youth group, and I knew that youth
Yes.
group was fun, and I knew that you got baptized because I don't know. And
'Cause
so
that's what you do.
yes, and so the conversation. I mean, we did come out with the fact that hey, we're living together and stuff, and so that was a part of that conversation. He was like, well. He actually said, well, why doesn't he just move out until you guys get married? And the conversation we had after that closed down was, this is May. Our wedding is in October. There's no way. And I was like, then let's just get married next month. And
Yeah,
so,
this conversation was May 8th.
yes,
We got married June 5th.
June 5th. So,
Wow.
Less than 30
yes.
Quick
And-
turnaround.
Yes. And so, but the conversation was, well, I think you need to get saved. I was not open to that at the time. Like, I was like, I know the Lord, but I'm glad we talked. We'll do an action item and we will move out from each other and we will get married and that'll remedy the guilt that I'm feeling.
Good
Thank you so
action.
much.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good
Yes.
action item.
Yes, it is a good action item. But
Well, and that's what I was saying. Like the Holy Spirit tugs on your ear,
Still
and the
gotta do something
solution
about
is
it.
there.
Yeah.
It might not be what you set out. Like I didn't ask for a marital solution.
Uh-huh.
We asked for a salvation issue or solution, and what we got was kind of, I don't know the Lord's plan, but we got what seemed like the first step.
Right.
So that was
So from right then, June 5th happens, you get married, go back to moving in together
Because you're married at this
because
point.
you're married. But there's a lot packed in from the latter half of 2020 into July of 2021. And so from what I know, just from what you gave us, the thought that marriage was going to turn everything around and we got it
Yep.
was not the case.
No.
And you made mention, and I like the use of the word even though the connotation is not good. You said in July of 2021 there was a crux. And that crux was a fight that you had that was nearly it.
It was.
Was nearly over, and I want to. We were at a men's conference this past week, and this was said, and I liked the way that we went through it. It was like the symptoms of something, and then the solution. So, what were some of the symptoms that between June 2020 to 2021? What were some of the symptoms that led up to that July 2021 crux?
I think for me, again, it's such an odd thing because it happened backwards for me, but you would think that I would feel guilty because we were living together and whatever else. I think that something that, and it might be sort of a side topic, but something that we don't talk about enough in the church is like the way that sex is addressed. Even from the time that you're in youth and you just hear, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. So I didn't feel guilty. I was doing it and I didn't feel guilty. And then I felt the Lord tug on my heart and I did feel guilty. And so I thought, okay, get married and this is better. And then I got married and that guilt didn't go away. And then it's like, why am I feeling guilty about being intimate with my husband? We're married. Like
we've done the right thing.
We've done the right
quote.
thing. We're married. And I would just have immense guilt after the fact. It would feel like I'm doing something wrong. Like every time it would be like, I'm dishonoring somebody, like something's not right in my soul. And that wasn't the truth. But I think, when there's a picture painted of like, don't do this, this is bad, it's bad, it's bad, rather than, hey, when you do this in the right context, what a gift, then you get it in your heart that this is bad, I'm bad for doing this bad thing. And it's not a bad thing, but that is the guilt that I felt. So there was a lack of intimacy there. That was a big deal for us.
Just like a shutdown for you, like because you didn't want the guilt, or like what was the lack of intimacy?
That was from both of us.
Okay.
So I was guilty, and then from what I understand, and I'll let him explain that more, obviously he's talked about there was a porn issue before.
Yes.
When I had been with him for years and then said, please go move into your parents' house for a month so that we can get married and be on the right side of this, that didn't look the same for us. So for me, it wasn't a big deal to go a month without, for him, going from being intimate with me multiple times a week to nothing at all, that symptom got worse because he was in isolation, out away from me.
Sure, yeah.
Wherever in his parents' house, and so that became kind of a situation where that was the thing for him, and I was feeling guilty. So there was just
definite, like 2 big symptoms that happened, kind of off the rip.
Yes.
Like
Into
now we've done the right thing, and now it's an instant clash.
Yes.
When the thought was, we did it, we're all good to go.
Well, and I think we've heard pastors say this before, but like all that Satan wants before you're married is to get you to have sex, and all that Satan wants after you're married is to get you to stop having sex, and that's exactly how that worked for us.
Yeah.
Aside from that, there was just a lot of, I don't even know that it was dishonesty. We weren't lying to one another, but we were not talking, and we weren't opening up. So there was
no communication.
There was no
happening.
communication, but what we were withholding on, like purposefully withholding information. So that's a type of dishonesty, and so there was that, and that was a big deal. And then probably the biggest one was just that we were turning to things outside of our marriage for comfort. So for him, that was the porn situation. And then for me, I had this group of friends. In particular, there was a guy in that group. And there was no intimacy or whatever, but it was a male friend that I was turning to for emotional regulation. And so rather than staying home and trying to work things out with my husband, I was going to this group of friends, and particularly that one, and spilling all these details about our marriage that I should not have been spilling to somebody that wasn't, leadership. And it was hearing, he's bad, he's terrible to you, you need to leave, over and over. And so we both were going outside of our marriage for what we should have been staying within our marriage for.
Absolutely.
I think that in the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis, one of the enemy's tactics is isolation and keeping you distracted. And what better way to isolate you than a worldwide quarantine?
Yep.
Yes.
What a better way to isolate you than to be seemingly alone with your wife, who you each have a problem with each other all the time.
Yep.
And then also like being distracted, like we were distracted with stupid crap. Like it wasn't like life building. Like now we're distracted with D group and
Yeah.
Sunday afternoon church and like Sunday morning church and loving on our
Child,
daughter
yeah.
and loving on ourselves. Like that distraction's of God.
Yeah.
But me wanting to play video games all day every day and her wanting emotional support from somebody and me going to porn, like those are the wrong distractions. And so we can see the symptoms of that illness
Yeah.
is a lot of isolation and distraction.
And that isolation led to loneliness. Like the loneliness started whenever I was like, oh, he doesn't like me, I don't feel loved. And then it was just like we were living together, but we were not living together. I actually moved out of our room. And when we were going through this timeline, he was like, I don't remember that. And I was like, I did. For multiple months, I did not sleep in our bedroom. So we had so many fights in our bedroom. I packed up myself and took myself to the guest room. And we did not sleep together.
Right down the hall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
Probably
Um,
never felt further away.
yes.
Ever.
And so just such isolation. And I think that was the thing. I know that when that big fight happened, I truly don't know what the fight was about. Neither one of us can remember
Sure.
because it's not important. But I know I was calm. And I remember, like I said, I know you think I'm doing this because I'm mad. I'm not mad. I don't feel loved. I don't feel like this marriage is working. I want a divorce, and I've looked into getting papers, and it's only $200. Like I'm done, and that was the conversation.
Like retrospective wisdom will tell you that whenever whoever you're fighting with stops fighting is when they're serious. So like if we're up in arms bickering all day, we're not really at our wits' end. We're not
Yeah.
really done with the
Yeah,
fight.
you haven't
We
give,
still
you
got-
have you have not given up if you're still raising the voice.
Yeah, like we still have fight in us. When she was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this goofy. This reminds me of the Drake and Josh scene where he's like you're not my brother.
That's crazy. That's a crazy pull from what we're talking about to be like. And this reminds me
Drake and
directly
Josh?
of
It's like,
the
you know,
Drake
the
and
scene,
Josh.
like he's like, I'm just done being rough.
Yeah.
Very calm, very cool and
Yes.
collected.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm
Sad.
not mad at you anymore. I'm just done.
That's what we
That's
call
what she
a
said.
Garretism. He
Yeah,
he does
right,
those a
right.
lot.
Songs,
But it works.
TV
I like the
shows,
Garretisms.
full on.
Well, I wanted to make sure, and I knew that was a huge part of the story is when you said, "I'm done." Like, I've got here are papers,
Yeah.
and we're it's almost we're not in that state anymore. Like we're on the other side of this, but since we got married, like have heard stories of married people, and I know people that they'll joke and be like,
Well,
I mean, I would
if
hear it
you
at
do that,
work.
I'll just divorce you.
I'll just divorce her if I go home and she does this. And every time I've ever heard that, it like makes me like curl up and I'm like, that's like one of the most serious, like it ends.
I think it comes from just desensitization.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
Sure,
That's
for
all it
sure.
And
Yeah.
I know friends that their, names for their spouse or girlfriends are like names that I'm like, man, I would never.
Yep.
But it's just
It
desensitized.
is. Well, and I know for us, like, it's just different because if somebody's never faced that situation, and they see it on TV all the time,
Sure,
and they hear whatever,
exactly.
then there's that. But for when we have, especially for him, because I'm the one that said it, it's alarm bells for him. Like, that's one of our, and we can talk about that later, but that's one of our absolutely not hard
Right.
stops. And so, it can't be a joke ever if it's a joke. If
Agreed.
it's said around him, it's alarm bells in his head immediately. And so it's a hard stop for us.
Well,
I-
like my stance on it, and you probably speak to this a little bit, like in the clinical side of it, but when someone's like, "Oh, I'll just kill myself," that's so
It's
alarming.
serious.
Yeah.
It's so bad that you institute them for 72 hours. Like it's not a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, like the divorce talk is marital suicide.
Mm.
That's all it is.
Right.
It's, I'm done with you, and I want to cut you out of my life. I want to kill that part of me.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really big deal. You can joke about whatever you want to joke about.
Not divorce.
You're joking about killing something. Okay, let's be honest about it.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so I knew when I saw that, and obviously that is a non-negotiable. Never say,
Yep.
and that helped like reaffirm me because I was like, I don't ever want in the middle of a fight over leaving dishes in a dishwasher or something. We're gonna talk about ending our marriage.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't, like I literally just got like
Yep.
bumps thinking about that. So I'm so happy that
Yeah.
that y'all are in a spot now where that is never
Yeah.
say non-negotiable again. But at that moment, it got quiet,
Yeah.
and it was real.
Yeah.
And it's even realer if you've got the price and you've got papers.
Yeah, so that was, again, I was kind of shut off to listening to her. And hindsight was when you told me, hey, she's pivoting towards the door.
Mm-hmm.
She had been for a while. And I forget who talks about it, but like extreme ownership. Like, I take fault in that because I could have seen that, but I didn't.
Mm.
And so, retrospectively speaking, I can't blame her because I wasn't listening to her.
Mm.
She's gonna be hurt at the end of the day. And I said, I'm not gonna be the one that listens to her.
Right.
And so, when she said, I'm done, I know where the papers are at, I've got the money set aside.
Yeah.
That was like a zoom out, oh, I hear all of what you just said for months and years.
Yeah.
I hear all of it right now. And I'm not at all saying that I've been a great listener since then, but with
But
serious,
the selective hearing was turned off
Yes,
at that
yes.
point.
the clouded, I'm angry at you, so I'm not going to listen to a word, went away.
Yeah.
I still hear her, I still try. Might not be right then because I'm mad at her,
Sure.
but the, hey, my wife doesn't want to be with me anymore,
Yeah.
that was big.
Yeah.
That was a gut check.
So you get to that point, and then there's a last ditch effort. What was that effort that started the pivot for both of you away from the door?
So we've talked about it, and neither one of us can remember what was said for the rest of the night. We went home. I don't know what was said. I do know that. Let me backtrack a couple months before that, and like not very long before that at all. We had joined our church in the previous November, and so from November to April, I sat in that church still feeling guilty every week, hearing the stuff, sitting next to my husband who wasn't listening to me, and I was saying, I don't feel right, and he was like, we got married, what is the deal?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know what the deal is, but I don't feel right.
Yeah.
And finally I was like, okay, we've got to talk to somebody, we've got to. And so we went up there, we did have a conversation with somebody, and it was like, hey, you need to know the Lord. And I was like, I've been in church for my whole life. And they were like, okay, but
So now this is person number 2
Yes.
who's saying these things
Yes,
to you.
and so we're sitting there having this conversation, and I'm like, I've been in church my whole life. Like, our current pastor baptized me before,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I feel silly. I don't want to be like, I get saved 900 times, but something's not right. And it's like, well, do you know of God or do you know God?
Yeah.
Because none of the fruits are present. And again, it's not like you have to get saved and then everything falls into place, because that is not how that works. But logically speaking, when you do know the Lord, there's some fruits there, and they do start to develop ever so slowly, but they do start to develop. And I didn't have fruits, We had moved in together. I didn't feel guilt until I did. I was drinking a lot and didn't care. Like, it was like I didn't have all this things that as a Christian, if you're doing these things, you're going to feel a little tug at your heart. I didn't have that. And so I was like, okay, I think you're right. Like, I have been playing church this whole time, and I do need to know the Lord. So that's a back step. But I got saved then, and that didn't help our marriage right then. But I think whatever the conversation was, part of me in the back of my mind was like, I found the Lord, and like, I do know that His plan is for marriages to show how He loves. That's why marriage exists. It's to show how He loves the church, and like, that's not what our marriage was doing, but that is the purpose. And it was like, deep in my soul, do I know, can it get there? So maybe that was part of why I was like, okay, I just remember what I said to him was, you have to, if you want us to figure this out, you have to find us a marriage counselor before the end of next week.
Wow.
I already have a place to go. I had lined up a place to move out to. I said, I already have a place to go. If you don't do it by the end of next week, I'm moving into such and such's house. And we were in counseling Tuesday.
Okay.
So
So that was the last ditch
That
effort was marriage counseling.
it was, yes.
Okay. Yeah, and so, and y'all will get into this a little bit more, but y'all have told us personally how big of an impact counseling did have on your marriage. And y'all started implementing like practical ways to start meshing more, communicating more, all those kind of things. What were some of those things you did to like usher in that fresh start post counseling?
So, honestly, for me, I don't remember, like, on paper, a lot of those practices. What I remember very, very vividly was, it's my turn to shut up and listen.
Wow.
It's my turn to not be thinking about myself and to hear what my wife is saying to somebody else. She must feel it so big that she's able to say it to somebody else. Because, like, there are feelings that I'm like, nah, I'm not confident enough in that to say it. And, like, there have been things that I just haven't said because I was like, I don't know if it's fully fleshed out. I don't know if I'm writing this. She was confident in that feeling enough where she was like, hey, this is the problem I've got with him. What do you think about it?
Well,
And
Having
it
a
was my
third
job.
party there.
Yeah.
Well, and that's another thing. Like when we first talked about it, we had talked about marriage counseling before, and I had brought it up before, you know, when he was saying for those months, like where I was saying, like where I was turning toward the door, I had been saying we need to get help, and the conversation piece there was, if we need a mediator to mediate our marriage, we have a bad marriage, and I'm like, yes, we do. That's it, you know.
That's why I'm
and
suggesting
so,
this.
and so, but that was something that, you know, I would encourage anybody with that, like having that mediator there doesn't mean that there's something wrong. You know, we had, that was good for us because we were able to both say what we needed to say without fear that the other one was going to not be listening or be listening just to respond, because we're in this room and we have to have a three-way conversation. And so it did open the door for both of us to be able to say what we need to say.
Well, and, like, it felt a little, like, for me personally, I don't like talking about my feelings. It felt a little over choreographed. Like, now it's Carissa's turn. Now it's,
Oh,
now it's
yeah.
James's turn to give his wisdom. Now it's Garrett's turn. Like, I'm like, let's just have a conversation.
Yeah.
That's not always what works. And
You
like,
maybe needed a little more structure
Yeah.
in those conversations.
yeah. And so, like, therapy taught me that, and even like personal therapy taught me that the way that I speak is not the way that everybody speaks. And the way that I feel listened to is not the way that everybody feels listened to. And so listening to her and what she's saying isn't important enough to shut up and listen. And I think that that's, communication is talking and listening. It's not just talking. You can communicate all day and not hear a single word and you didn't listen to it. You can have an actual conversation.
Right.
But some action items that we were using during that time, we implemented hard stops. So I mentioned that the divorce was a hard stop. We had some others that were just personal to us because of things that we had gone through, but we had, let's make a list. These are the things you cannot do, we cannot do as a couple, I cannot do. And if it's on this list, we're making this list in counseling now. We're not going to add junk to it later just because we're mad and fighting.
Right.
This is the list, and these are the things that are absolutely nots for our marriage. And so, divorce, not opening that. If the door doesn't exist, you can't walk through it. So don't bring it up. That was one, and then just different conversation strategies, but also for us and being honest, like just no matter what, hard truths is what we call it. And I will say anything to him, even if it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You just got to say it. We're married. We're going to be married for the rest of our lives. Like, you got to get used to the uncomfortable. But one thing that was huge for us that's so odd, but it really worked for us, I mentioned I moved out. I moved into a different room. So our bedroom was, he described it as a war zone. And it was. That's where we had all our fights. We were there. We were whatever. That's where we weren't engaging in intimacy. That's where all of our problems were happening. So we packed up our master bedroom and moved it to a different room in the house. And so, I mean, that's an odd one. I don't expect anybody to say, oh, yes, our master bedroom, let's move somewhere else. But that worked for us.
I actually love that because it's literally symbolic of a fresh start.
Yes.
So, like, I think that's wonderful. And I think other couples might need to hear that,
And
who
so,
might need a fresh start.
Well, and I also said, like, it doesn't have to be a whole move out. We moved to a whole room of the house, a different room. But it could be like if you're staring at the same decor on the walls every time you're fighting, take it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
One, like, you can even do that with, I've heard people doing it with, like, campus. This is we're going to have a serious conversation campus. Or this is the, I'm feeling frisky candle. Like, it's like a real tool that people use to, like, implement, this is the mood that I'm in.
Yeah, it's a communication tactic.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so like the environment that you're in dictates how you act.
Okay.
We've had to start for better communication if it's going to get serious or just have a serious conversation. She does. It's not like I have to, but she's got to be like, after we eat dinner,
Yeah.
I need time. Either I need time to tell you about what is going on with me, or we need to talk about this. Here's like your 30-minute window.
Well,
to,
I ask permission. I
Right.
usually say, like, I have these things that I want to talk about after dinner or whatever. Like, if you have the capacity, I need it
Yeah.
right now.
So-
like we need to set that for later.
I
So-
like the rule of after dinner though, because we also talked about in anger situations, it's normally halt, hungry, angry, lonely, or tired.
Oh yeah,
It's
love
that's
that.
the thing that it is. So if you are waiting until after dinner, if you're saying if you have the emotional capacity, let's make sure we're not hungry, angry, lonely, or tired before we have this conversation.
And some of those arguments may be over hunger and loneliness
Yes,
and
yes.
tired, but
So if we resolve those, then maybe we don't even need to have a conversation.
but I'm a processor, and it's like if I get something thrown on top of me and it's like I need a critical thinking answer from you now, I'm like, and I won't say anything because I'm like, if I say what I'm thinking immediately, that's not how I want to say it. Like there's a better way to word what I want to say than be like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. It's like, that's not really what I want to say. So I need to be able to word what I want better. So she's giving me like, you get 20 minutes. If you get 20 minutes and then it's on.
Get in the zone.
So-
Yeah.
But I like the candle idea. We might have to start with a candle.
So I've got a question, and I send the questions out to everybody, but I don't send all of them, because if you had an answer ready for everything, then we'd just be reading off of PowerPoint. What would you say to a couple that is in a similar place to where you were at your lowest when they say, we got this? Two of us, we're going to figure this out.
All by ourselves.
We got it. What would you say to them?
My answer is no, you don't. Respectfully, not to get hyper religious, but marriage was created by God for us as a tool to show us how He loves us.
Yeah.
That's its only purpose. It, like, I don't know that in back in the day it was a piece of paper that the government got a tax off of.
Sure.
It was just, hey, our family recognizes that we're together and only together, not with anybody else. And the fruits of that are children and building a home and like, so like it wasn't as structured as it is now. Like we're not, I don't think back then they were identified like legally as like two people. It was a construct. And so being the fact that marriage is a construct designed by God to represent something, we are going to fail every single time that we try to manipulate that we try to make it right, that we try to fix our own marriage. You can't fix something. If I made a game and I wanted you to play it, you're not going to be able to play the game and fix the game. It's not a possibility. You're not outside of it. You don't have the coding to it like that.
Yeah.
I designed it, and God designed this thing for us, and so we got this. No, you don't.
Well, and something else. There's a book called Love and Respect, and I read that, and that's another thing that helped us post like when we decided we were going to make it work. But in most cases, the thing that men need most is respect, and in most cases, and sometimes this is flipped, but in most cases, the thing that women need most is love. Well, the problem is when you're trying to figure things out on your own, you're on the crazy cycle. So you're not feeling love, so you're not giving respect. He's not feeling respect, so he's not giving love. And you're in this endless circle. And unless you're willing to completely just decide that it's okay for you to put away any of your needs and you're just going to cater to the other person until that crazy cycle breaks, you're not going to be able to break it on your own. And I don't think that for the most part, anybody's going to be able to put aside all of their needs and say, hey, I don't have anything that I need from you. Let me only take care of you. That, in an ideal world, awesome. But we do all have needs. So
Yes.
without getting to work and praying a lot and being in church and seeking wise counsel and whatever else there are as action steps, you're not going to be able to get out of that crazy cycle unless you're willing to just say, I don't need anything from you. And if you're to the point where you're talking about divorce, you don't not need anything
Right.
from the other person, you know?
Yes. Well, and being able to say, like, I don't have any needs from you. Yes, you do,
Yes.
underneath. And so those are going to end up going unmet.
Yes.
And if they go unmet for too long, then you get back in
into
the crazy cycle all over again.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I also think there's an aspect of the crazy cycle is perpetuated because I'm saying I need something more than I recognize that you need something. I need respect more than you need love, even though I see that you're not feeling love. And so that pretty much coincides with, like, I'm so good at whatever I do that I can solve this problem.
Mhm.
No, you can't. You're not that good. You're
And
not. And the saving grace there is that we have material, which is the Bible. We have wise counsel, which is
A lot of
elders
things,
and
yeah.
like people that have
Always
experienced
someone
stuff.
else.
There's
Yes.
always somebody that's either experienced what you've experienced, knows somebody that has, or we have the good teacher.
Yes.
And I believe that the good teacher did a really good thing, and he's the solution to the problem.
And I would say you just got to get to work. I mean, and people who are like at that point where they're so tired they don't feel like they can work, you're going to be doing work either way. Either you're going to have to work healing from this divorce that has left you without, half of yourself because you've tied yourself to somebody, and the papers and the process that goes with it, that's work too. And so
Yes.
what hard thing are you willing to do, you know?
Way to have a great answer for the secret question.
Yes.
That's good.
So we are going to kind of transition into y'all's fresh start. So we are really wanting to hone in on this because that's
Yes.
where like the growth has happened and transformation has taken place. And so yes, counseling was a huge piece, but there's been so much stuff that's happened post counseling from what y'all have shared with us. So things in 2022 is when this started to look a lot healthier for you guys from what y'all have shared. And then talks for trying for a baby started.
Yes.
But then they stopped
Yes.
as well in the
Yes.
back half of the year. So when you just started feeling like things were all looking up, how were you able to manage that season differently? Whoa, that's not right.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
you know what?
My
You know
bad.
what? I got it. Compared to the year when you were at your lowest,
I get it now.
wow, that's really good. How were you able to deal with this season as a couple differently than you would have freshly engaged, freshly moved in,
Yeah.
things like that?
So I would say I'm going to let him answer for the most part because he's got a lot of good things to say on that. But the things that happened were stressors, even though they were good things. So we chose to move to a different city. We started new jobs again. We started talking about having a baby, and that didn't happen immediately. And I'm not saying that it was a big traumatic situation, but when it didn't happen in the first little bit, it was just like, okay, that's hard, and I don't want to deal with that hard
Sure.
right now. So we were having these stressful events that were would have been ground zero. It would have been a war zone a couple years ago. Sorry.
No, so yeah, I mean, I think the single thing that changed outside of a new season of life with new tools and all that was that we were finally on the same team.
Yes.
It wasn't, well, you want this and I want this and that clashes, so we're not doing it. Or you want something that I don't like, and so we're going to do it, but I'm going to be angry the whole time, which is stupid. And so, like, this time it was, the moving conversation was, I think we had started going to the Paragould campus before, we had been going for a couple of years.
Yes.
And I really, like, for the backstory is I've moved around quite a bit in my life and landed in Jonesboro and finally felt at home. Like, that was kind of a big, like, subconscious mental thing for me, was never feeling at home. And so
And
I
I
finally,
wanted out of there.
yeah, she had lived in Jonesboro her entire life.
And I didn't
She
want to.
doesn't like the town because
Yeah.
she's lived there
'Cause,
forever.
yeah.
It's either you love the town or you don't if you live there forever. And I finally felt at home, and so one of the things that was of contention there was, I want to stay and you want to go. So what do? We moved to the town just north of here. Completely different town, completely different feel. Close enough to where
He didn't.
I'm not disconnected from everything that I grew to feel at home with, but also it's different because it's a small town, and she teaches, and some of her kids go to the church and
Yeah.
say, "Hey, I got saved this week,"
Yes.
and like she gets to grow up with it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that's so cool.
Well, something there though that compromise, right? Like that's a big thing that before that wasn't in the cards, right? Like we weren't hearing each
Yeah.
other, we weren't hearing of each other's needs and trying to find a solution that worked for both of us. We both were hearing our own needs and trying to find what
right.
solution worked for us.
Yep.
So
Individually.
yes, and so it was like never the selfishness there was never trying to meet the other person's needs but thinking me. Well, here's a situation where we're like, hey, I want this and I want this, and it's like, well, we've got to come up with something that works for both of us. Lots of conversation, communication, and then like, yeah, I don't know what I was gonna say.
No, that makes sense though.
Isn't it so crazy though? Like, we have to work together, but like, let's work together
Yes.
through this,
Yes.
as compared to like, not only am I not gonna let you know what I feel about this, but if you tell me something I don't want to hear, then we're at it,
Yes.
and like we're going at it.
One of the biggest pieces of advice that I've ever been given when it comes to marriage is when you have problems, you fight the problem, not each other.
Yes.
And I feel like that's exactly what y'all just
It
said.
is.
Like,
It
and you were fighting each other in the previous
Yes.
times that y'all had shared about. Y'all were not fighting the problem.
Yes. And sorry.
One of the things from our early marriage was, you are the problem.
Mm-hmm.
You are my problem. Everything that you are is what I don't like, which is terrible, but
Well,
But that's what
how
it
we
was.
both felt. We mutually agreed that we didn't like each other,
Yep.
Yeah.
whether we said it or not. And like you said, the therapy and wisdom and just living a little bit of life together taught us, okay, it's better if we both face this thing.
Mm.
Yeah.
Whether it's the enemy whispering in our ear or just a tough situation,
Yeah.
it goes better both ways to fight it together.
And also, I think finding somewhere to put our energy, because when we were stuck in COVID, there was nowhere to put our energy. We weren't. We didn't mention this earlier, but we weren't able to even be in church because church was closed. You
Yeah.
know, and so
Yes.
there was nowhere to put our energy except for into the problems that we had. And so, in addition to good communication, we found outlets. So, like, we started serving at church. We didn't just go to the church. We started serving. We started
Yeah.
finding areas that we could be of use, and something about idle hands make say it. I don't.
Idle hands is the devil's workshop.
Yeah. So like, if we aren't gonna sit here and have idle hands and not do anything, we're not going to come up with as many issues with one another.
Right.
And so we started to do things that would benefit our surroundings, but also feed back into our hearts.
Right. That actually leads directly into the next question, which was, today you've got Riley, and you just mentioned you're heavily involved in church. We've been in D groups together and life groups for over 3 years, and you're active in the community. So I just want to, because we're on the redemption side, and these past couple questions have been on the redemption side of this, but how do y'all just feel right now as a unit and as a family? Like, where are you
So
at?
Garrett, that means you have to talk about your feelings.
No, I mean, yeah, I'm not gonna make you, but
I am.
she is. So like,
It's the therapist
where
in me.
where are y'all at feeling right now together?
I think we feel like a team finally. I mean, when we do have situations where we're arguing and we're fighting, like, well, one, for the most part, we can literally say, I think we're tired right now. Like, that's a thing we can identify now where we're at and why the things are happening. And obviously, sometimes there are actual issues that are caused by actual
Right.
issues, but
Yes.
that's also a thing where sometimes there are actual issues and they're enhanced by the fact that it's 11 p.m. and our kid's been up since 5, you know? And so we're able to say, as a team, hey, I think we're tired right now, or hey, like, I don't think we can resolve this in the next hour. Can we go to bed closely? Can we cuddle? Can we go to
Yeah.
bed holding each other and talk about it in the morning? And for 9 times out of 10, when that's the situation, we wake up in the morning and it's like,
We both
clear
woke up
cut.
like, so sorry.
It's
that
a
was
clear
so
cut answer, but even if it's a problem, it's like, okay, yes, that was the case. If we do this, then this is probably how that's going to go. And it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's so much easier to solve whenever we have that teamwork aspect. Also, just such a big deal for me of how I feel. I think about on probably a daily basis, like truly probably a daily basis, what I almost lost. That is making me emotional. That is such a big deal for me. And I think if there's anything anybody needs to hear, it's that, you know, like if I would have gone with what I wanted to do, because that is what I wanted to do. I found papers, I priced them, like I wanted out. And that's not what the Lord had planned. That's what Carissa had planned. And if I had gone
That'll
with
preach.
what I wanted to do, I would not have, like, if you asked me as a person now for the list of the things that I love, aside from God, I would have none of those things. I love my church. Like, I love where we go to church. I love what we do at church. I love my child. I love where we live. I love our friends that we have. I love Garret. But
Say
I would
Carissa,
not,
say Garret, say
but-
Garret.
but I would not have any of those things if I had followed my plan. So that's the biggest nugget, is just like take a step back and realize, like, in 2 years, what would your life look like, you know? Because I truly would not have any of the things I love other than God, because God's never going to leave you, but I would not have any of the other things that I love at all. None of them.
I definitely, I said this the other day, you just kind of glance into these questions and trying to figure out what we feel, but the word that immediately came to mind was challenged, and like that's definitely not in a bad way, but I think before the crux, before this new shift, I was on the defensive all the time. I was trying to deflect. I was trying to like say that's not a problem that I need to deal with and try to dodge it. Now I've got two swords. Instead of two shields, I've got two swords, which has its pros and cons, but daily I'm appropriately terrified of, you know, gotta make money,
Sure.
gotta lead my family, gotta stay safe, gotta, you know, in a good way, make her happy, make my daughter feel loved, protect them at all costs. And before it was, oh, that's a problem, I don't want to deal with it.
It's so easy, and it was easy to take care of me.
Because you can just show up.
But I love that, like, a good challenge, because a challenge is balancing life together and not just, it is, you know, it's putting yourself aside for someone else.
Well, and like, I definitely don't ever want to speak poorly of other men, but you can tell that a man has got it all together when his family's good. A successful businessman with no family, there's an era of I feel bad for him. He's alone, but he's so successful in this hyper realistic situation. This is my success.
Yeah.
If I don't have this, if this isn't squared away, if this isn't good, none of that other crap matters.
Yeah.
And I think that took a very long time to. I wanted money and things, and that shallowness blinded me to this is what's important. Because from this we get all the good things.
Yeah.
And I do think that another piece of that is I do feel loved now. Like, here we are. We're at this place where for years I was like, does he love me? Does he love me? Does he love me? And I don't wake up wondering that. I don't feel resentment. Like, we've learned how to use each other's strengths and weaknesses. It's another thing. We are not the same personality type, and we had to learn that, and we had to learn what that meant for our marriage and how we interact with one another. But I don't think that when he's acting the way that is his personality, it means that he doesn't love me. I now know, like, you know, my spouse does love me. He wants to take care of me. When he interacts with things like this, it's because he's feeling like he needs to protect me, or, you know, whatever the case may be. Like, I feel loved. And if you would have asked me a couple years ago if that was the case, or if it would ever be the case, I would not have told you yes. And like, it can get there.
Yeah.
So what you said reminded me of something super good from the men's conference we were at. And one of the guys said, you have your whole life to be successful or to win. Like, in a job or in a career or in something outside, but you only have a set amount of time to be successful at home.
Yeah. Well, we're only going to be 4
Yeah.
years married with a 10-month-old for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're only going to be 26 and 25
Yeah.
for so long.
Yeah. And that adds the challenge
Yeah.
of what you
Like
were
I
talking
said,
about.
an appropriate
Yeah.
amount of terror.
Sure.
On a daily basis of, yesterday's gone and I can't get it back.
Right.
So let's make today good.
Yep. That's exactly right. I love that. So I've added in too many secret questions that kind of lead us into wrapping it up and just like y'all have talked about so many action items for couples, but I'll let you kind of get those into a formal list so we can just clip it and ship it. But so I had the little
been
secret
waiting to
question.
say that.
The secret questions have nothing to do with you two.
Okay.
Well, I guess they do. Riley
Okay.
is such a good baby in public. From what
What
we
we've seen.
from what we see
Okay.
from what we see
At
now.
church.
Yes.
At-
Yes.
How bad is she at home?
No.
Oh, I thought
I
that's where I was going to.
I can only we can only
No,
guess.
she's wonderful
No.
all the time.
So, how did you start acclimating? And this is for the people with newborns that are watching or listening. How do you begin acclimating into those like social scenarios to pretty much just like get Riley ready to be such a good and like well-mannered baby in social?
Well-mannered baby.
Well, I mean, she doesn't know.
No,
She doesn't know that she's doing good, but in those situations,
That's luck.
I think some of us are born with a docile soul, and she's one of them.
Like that.
that's good.
Well, we've been told that we better stop at 1. That's what we've been told. No,
Oh my goodness.
from what we hear from when he was a baby, he was that way,
Mm.
and I was very much not. I was not a bad baby, but when I was tired, I screamed until
Sure.
until I passed out, and that's just she's calm. But I mean, routines at home, those are good things.
Yeah,
to have.
it's super cliche, but there's freedom and boundaries. And like, since she was born, we've not like in like a military sense, but we've tried to keep her on schedule.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I'm really hoping right now at 8:53 she's asleep, because if she's not, we're gonna have a rough night because we know her.
Sure.
And we know her schedule.
Yeah.
And so like when you see her out in public, it's because we've kind of orchestrated.
The
when you
times
see
that
it.
you'll be there.
Because if she's napping, we're not gonna be there.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I said that to somebody the other day. I was like, some people are able to just pick their babies up and take them, and if she's at a nap and we have somewhere to be, I'm like, have fun.
Yeah.
Have fun. I'll be there in a little bit. She's asleep. Like,
Well,
you know.
and one thing that I want to caution against, because if anybody's listening to this and they're like, "Yep, that's what we're doing from now on," please don't hear that our entire lives revolve around our kid.
Right.
We've
that's true,
implemented
too.
this schedule for us,
Right.
Yeah.
Around.
so that we don't have to be at church with a screaming baby,
Sure.
Yes.
so that we don't have to be out with friends and have to leave because
Yeah.
we didn't know when she was going to be going. to
Thank
sleep.
you for being able to be over here for multiple hours.
Yeah,
That's great.
like if we didn't have a plan in place,
Mhm.
if we didn't have these boundaries set of it's 7 o'clock on a school night, we're not going out
Yeah.
Yeah.
because that's
Sure.
going to ruin the rest of our night.
Yeah.
Because if she's asleep at 8:30, we've got 2 hours to spend with each other,
Yes.
and not killing ourselves in the morning thinking, "Man, we really should have gone to sleep."
Yes.
Yeah.
It's for us. These
Yeah,
boundaries,
they
these
are.
rules, these schedules
Awesome.
are for us.
But she's just well mannered.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
that. She just is.
You
She's
you
awesome.
saying people told you that you need to stop at 1. I remember the Coopers when they were still here at Life Group and they had Stella. We asked about sleep and Trey went, "She sleeps 8 hours a night."
Yeah.
And they were like, and everyone tells us do not have another kid.
They do.
Because-
Yes. I'm not, and I just didn't think that people really said that, but truly we hear that on a weekly basis. They're like, "You better not ever have another one." Okay.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
we did want to kind of wrap all this up with some action items for people who may have related to any piece of what y'all shared today. We know everybody's marriage story is unique, but any sort of nuggets of wisdom, action items that you would give, kind of those bullet points, so to speak, that we can, what'd you say? That we can
Clip it,
Clip it
ship
and
it.
ship it.
clip it and ship it.
Okay.
I'll let you go first because I'm confident in my answer.
Okay.
It'll blow
Yeah,
it out of the
he
water.
he told me he wasn't going to tell me his when we were talking about this yesterday. So okay, I would say that for sure, if you're both in a place where you're willing to do this, pray together and pray together frequently. It's uncomfortable, especially when you're not doing good.
We're not
I'll say
great
on
at
the
it.
Front end.
Yeah,
We are
we
not
need to
either, and
work
we've
on
been
that.
doing it. I'm not good at praying out loud, and I just never have been. It's awkward for me. I sound crazy, and I teach all day, and I talk, but when I pray out loud, I just sound like mush. But you know what? Oh well. Like you're talking to your father. Oh well. Like when Riley starts talking, she's probably gonna sound like mush. Like it's fine. And so I would say, as uncomfortable as it is, pray together. I would say create a new space, and it doesn't mean you have to move your bedroom, but create a space that feels safe to you. So if you're looking at the same pictures, take them down off the wall. If that's not the situation for you and you're good with the decor, create a safe space in your house where this is an area we go and we do not have serious conversations here. Whatever that area is, go say this is a spot that we have positive conversations where we
It's a
build each
safe
other up,
zone.
and this is a safe zone. I would say if you're open to counseling, like really, that's so beneficial. And I know there's that stigma and whatever else, but I mean, I don't know where we would be if we hadn't been open to that truly.
Yeah.
Those are mine.
Those
Yeah,
are great.
when like with counseling, like it doesn't have to be this like we're ironing out every single issue.
Yeah.
Like it's a maintenance tool.
It is. Yeah.
We learned how to talk to each other with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we didn't leave counseling having those issues that we came into counseling ironed out. There were things that we left counseling still like, okay, this was a thing that you did and it really hurt me. And to this day, sometimes that comes back up. It still hurts, and that doesn't mean that can't be the case. Some things are going to hurt forever, probably. The fact that I asked him for a divorce is going to hurt forever. That's how that is. But how do we manage that? And we have the tools to manage it now.
Yeah, it was a mind shift, mindset shift for that one. My answer is Blake gave. I don't remember where it was at or when he was talking about it, but one of the things that he said about prayer is that it is the least prideful thing you can do. It's if you're not a praying person, I'd suggest praying. You know, let's talk about God a little bit, but praying for anything, but specifically praying for your wife. It's saying, God, I realize that you created this beautiful creature and you gave her to me in this perfect format, and I'm not going to be the one that does it right. And so, Lord, I want you to guide me. I want you to show me how to love this woman the way that you designed her to be loved. And then even like the personal issues that she has, like if it's a self-image thing, if it's a struggle at work, if it's a whatever. Lord, I want you to guide me on how to love this woman. Because Jesus is going to come back and claim his bride, and he did it perfectly, and I've got my bride, and I don't do it perfectly. And so, praying for guidance, specifically for my wife, on a daily basis. She doesn't know that. She doesn't know that every single time. She might not even know that I do that a lot. But when I started praying for her, it changed my mindset.
Right.
It changed how I saw her. Not only were prayers answered, not only did the Holy Spirit tug on her more, but like it shifted me. And I think through that I became not like in like a toot my own horn, but I think lowering myself made me a better husband. And I don't I'm not able to do that on my own.
I feel like it
In the right
softened your heart. It softened his heart to me. Like there's, it's not like I'm talking to somebody who doesn't have feelings in
Right.
their heart. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's a humility that's there within y'all's marriage.
Well, I think that's what good marriage is made of. Is I don't have all the answers for you. You don't have all the answers for me, but let's figure it out.
Right.
So.
Well, right over there we have our vows and our marriage covenant, and clearly not perfect on all of them or most of it.
Definitely
And
not.
I'll tell you this one's for free. There was a night that we were having it out, and I was standing in that doorway, and I looked at her vows, And I went, and I just started reading them off because I felt in that moment, and it wasn't even like super serious, but I was like, I felt disrespected. So you know what? I'm going to read your vows to me off and see what you think about what you were just talking about and how you sounded.
I bet that worked exactly.
No, it was awful. It was awful. Don't recommend at all.
I
But-
needed the reminder, just not in that way.
Yeah, but one of mine says, I promise to love you as Christ loves the church, being the bride. So I'm glad that you said that. And I'll tell you, fellas, listen up to that point, because praying, even though it's not out loud almost ever, praying for your wife and how to like properly love your wife and care and just live life with her goes a long way, because there's a lot of time my instant reaction is like why would you say that? And it's like, ooh, that would really hurt if I said it that way. So when I pray, I'm like being proactive about how do I want to handle situations if they come up. And a lot of times they don't. But like, I am praying to keep my heart ready for just conversations that will happen or things that come up throughout the workday. And like, if she comes home and has had a bad day at work, please do not say, who cares, what are we having for dinner? Like, that's going to, like, it's going to throw off everything. So it's like preparing myself to just like love and serve
I have,
my wife.
speaking on that, one more action item that
Sure.
I thought of when you said that, expecting the best in the other person. That is something that's huge. I talked to my students about this the other day just because we were talking about the way that we speak to each other. And a lot of times, whatever comes out of somebody's mouth, it's not necessarily intended for hurt. Like, that might come from a place of hurt, or it just might come from a place of ignorance. I mean, if he doesn't know that I had a bad day, and I haven't talked to him, he's not going to know to handle with care, right?
Yeah.
So, expect the best in someone, and if, you know, the rest will follow. Like, if he says something hurtful, maybe approach it with, like, why would you,
What did
right?
you just say?
Right? But say, like, hey, what did you think I just said? Or like, like, hey, let's take a step back. I'm feeling pretty sensitive today. I had a bad day. You're hurting my feelings. And it's like, I wasn't trying to. I'm so sorry you had a bad day. You know,
Yeah.
that expecting the best rather than going on the attack or on the defense as soon as you feel hurt.
Love that. And there have been times when I have said whatever I have, and Ashlyn responds is like, no, you don't understand. Like, that was rude. Like, you just spoke to me rude, and I don't talk to me like that. And I went, that is not how I meant that.
Yeah.
And I was like, I had no idea, because I am truly, I'm walking into the door like prepared to just like make some quip or something. It just pokes at her. But when it's on certain days of things I had no idea, she's like, that's not it. And I go, I would never purposefully say something like that to hurt you. Like, you've got to understand, that's on me, and I shouldn't have said that, but I meant no harm by that. So that's, and then when I say, this is what I meant to say, she's like, man, I wish you would have started with that. I wish you wouldn't have done that. So, to truly wrap it up, we have started asking this question, and I'll explain it first. So the question is, what is your table? And the whole reason this was called Table Talk is because Tony and Amy set one of their non-negotiables for their son growing up, which was, and they weren't perfect at it, and I make sure to say that every time because he does. It was, when we get to the dinner table in the dining room, it is no phones, it is no electronics, we are eating and we are talking it out. Good, bad, ugly, this is our time as a family. And he said the perfect description of your table, which doesn't have to be a table, is a place where you stop and slow down and have meaningful conversations with somebody, anybody. And if you haven't heard the Moore's answer, you need to go and watch it because I'm about to spoil it. One of the most unique answers we've gotten, they said, our road, like the road that we walk on, is their table. So it can, ours is our coffee table, and we sit on the couch, and I sit in that chair. Where is your table? Or if you don't have one, where would you like it to be?
Well, ours is lame. Ours is a table.
Hey, no.
Well, I feel
Be
like,
nice.
like, practically speaking, when we're at the table, we remember the rules. But I do think that our table follows us. So, like, when we get home, I'll approach her in the kitchen. If she's standing in the kitchen. And I'll say, hey, I've missed you today. I'm glad I'm home. And, like, that's like a very, maybe it's not like in-depth conversation and we're hashing everything out. But it is everything else stops, and that's our home. And so, in like a super corny way, I think that the table is a mindset. I think that we're reminded of why we're at the table when we're at the table, but sometimes the table follows us where
Right.
we're at. And so, like, the Moors going out into the road, like, I bet every time they're walking that road, they think, like, their subconscious just, let's talk to each other.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's what the table's for.
And I think
And so,
our table accidentally became our table because when we didn't have a baby, like,
we
it
never
was,
ate at the table.
we didn't ever eat it. No, when we didn't have a baby, we did not. We ate in the living room with the show, and we talked when we got in bed. We watched shows for dinner, but we talked in our bedroom. Like, after we were ready to go to bed, we would lay there and talk. But now we have a baby, and so that's shifted. Bedtime is normally bedtime. And so I accidentally started leaving my phone in the other room because I was tending to her. And so since my phone is not even in the room with us at the table, and she actually has a seat at the table, that's super cute. We don't use a high chair, we use a seat at the table. But
cute.
so we all have a seat at the table, and then my phone is never in there with me anymore. Now it's intentional, but it didn't used to be intentional. And so we're feeding her, and we're able to sit, and that's our first time we can talk about our day. And so our table became our table once we had our baby.
Awesome.
Because we
Love
really
that.
never, as a married couple, ate at the table.
We did not.
We hardly ever.
Yeah.
You know when we do? When people come over and it's got a fall place setting or a spring place setting, and we're like, hey, come over, and
So
we
that
will
can
actually
use our pretty stuff.
sit at our table
Yeah.
and eat
Yeah,
once.
exactly.
Well, I love that answer. Just a total philosophy answer from Garrett and a practical one from Carissa.
That's our life.
But that is going to wrap it up here, and I just want to say thank y'all so much for sharing with us and walking us through your story. And all I can hope is that somebody that is watching or listening comes to this and hears your story and just goes, we're in that place now. Thank God, literally, that these are action items that can help us get rid of the place that we're in. So I'm just so thankful that y'all were comfortable to share with us and talk us through that. And I just want to say thank you so much for listening and watching. And if you liked what you heard or watched, please like and subscribe and leave a comment down below on maybe some topics that you want to be covered. This was a heavy topic, but because of where you are now, it's such a life-bringing topic. So, you'll go ahead,
One last thing.
please.
And I don't know if you said it, you probably did, but you're not alone.
Yes.
You're not the only person that's ever dealt with what
No.
you're dealing with.
That's right.
And I think that stopped us a lot.
And all marriages are salvageable.
Yes.
I love being married. I love being
Yes.
married.
It's possible to fix whatever you're in.
Awesome.
And so,
Yeah.
that's
I love that.
that's important to me.
So, from our table to wherever yours is, thank you so much for watching and listening, and we will see you in the next one.